to be able to imitate those bait fish. Really the ones that you're trying to imitate with that were the ones that were hatched out this spring in that shad spawn. Finally, to did that in the last one. Everybody, here we are for our second edition of the Pick 4 Baits, and we're talking about the month of November. But I am still in the same shirt as I was in October. I'm really starting to smell pretty bad, so just throwing that out there. But no, here we are, month of November. Pick 4 baits. A lot of this stuff, some of it's you're gonna see some similarities to the month of October, and that's just because some of this stuff throughout the fall, you know, it's a process. It doesn't change immediately, you know, from October all the way to November. There's some subtle changes. There's some stuff going on, but yeah, definitely some similarities in some of the baits as to what we went through, you know, from last month. But these are 4 baits that are going to work a lot like that last month. Now, up in those more northern portions of the country, you all are definitely, by this point in time, seeing some much cooler weather. And some of this stuff, you may say, man, that's kind of beyond where we're at. I get it. Hey, you know, so a lot of this is going to be southeast. You know, I live in Tennessee, so these are things that I have used year in and year out in the month of November. So, you know, people around this area or maybe a little bit further south, this stuff may be working for you all still. Those folks up in the northern region, you may need to fast forward to the December or January edition to see some baits that are working for y'all. But let's get into it. So still thinking a little bit of topwater. Man, I've had some fantastic days in the month of November fishing the topwater bait. No question about it. Truthfully, my best day ever of fall topwater fishing actually happened in December. But generally speaking, it's about over with by the time you get to the end of November, those really, really good topwater days. But a big difference between October and November for me, buzzbait kind of goes out of the rotation. A lot of that's due to how much cooler it is now. The fish are moving a little bit slower. They're really not wanting to chase a buzzbait quite like they were, you know, during the month of October. Now, you all further south, hey, a buzzbait may still be playing, you know, even more so than a walking bait would. But around here, a walking bait definitely gets the nod much more in November due to that water temperature dropping, you know, down through the 60s. A lot of times it's already in the 50s here in the month of November. So a walking style bait like the Rashi Topwalker again. This is the big one. This is the size 13. The Rapala Skitter V is a great walking bait. The Skitter Walk is another good one. But those large topwater baits, especially like this one, that's what I like. Earlier in the year, you know, the size 11, the bait fish aren't quite as big, you know, can be good. And this would be mimicking a couple-year-old bait fish. This isn't matching the young of the year bait fish. You're targeting bait fish or bass that are keyed in on much larger bait fish when you're stepping up to that size 13 in the topwalker. Next one up would be a lipless crankbait. Lipless crankbait is a great way to cover, you know, some of those vast areas where our fish will get in. They'll get in those flats where there's not a ton of cover, not a lot of depth change, places where, you know, it's just, man, kind of void of stuff except for bait. That becomes such a big deal once you get into this time of the year. A couple different ones. This is a 13 fishing Magic Man. That's a good little lipless crankbait. But my favorite, no doubt about it, is that Storm Arashi Vibe. A lot of reasons why it's my favorite. For one, it helped me win the Classic. That'll always have a special place to me. But that Storm Arashi Vibe, it's not a loud bait. It doesn't have a lot of loud rattles in it. It's just got that weight in there that's kind of loose, so it gives it that soft knocking sound. And a lot of great bait fish colors in this. This is for sure one of my favorite bait fish colors in it. I think it's called Wakasaki, somewhere in there. That's something kind of like that is what it's called. But that's actually a little tip that I'll give you that I do with that Arashi Vibe, especially on the bait fish colors, is use that VMC bladed hybrid treble. I've caught several fish on that thing that really had that particular hook choked. Was it just dumb luck, or was it something that they were really keyed in on? Beats me. All I know is that it works. And if it works, I'm going to keep doing it. That little bit of flash that it adds, I've seen times where it, no doubt, I felt like helped keep those, or get those fish keyed in on that particular hook and help eat that bait a little bit better. And it really doesn't add any drag to it. It doesn't hurt the action of the bait. and you know, just a neat way to add a little bit of extra flash to it. But Storm Veracity Vibe, definitely a great lipless crankbait to be throwing in the month of November. Next up, one that's definitely very near and dear to my heart, and to be honest, it was hard not to put this little dude in every video for the fall. Crankbait fishing is for sure my favorite thing to do almost all year long, but especially in the fall. And Tiny is just a fish catching son of a gun. And this time of the year, a lot of those young of the year bait fish, the ones that were hatched from this year's shad spawn, they're still pretty small. And those bass that are keyed in on those, Tiny is a great way to trigger those fish into biting. So it's a little thin, flat-sided crankbait. Yeah, Rapala OG Tiny, just a little dude. You can throw it on bait casters. That's actually what I do most of the time anymore. If you want to drop down and throw it on spinning rod, absolutely nothing wrong with that either. That is a great way to be able to, you know, to fish that bait. But yeah, shad colors again. That's the copper green shad. Excellent color and Tiny to be able to imitate those bait fish. Really, the ones that you're trying to imitate with that were the ones that were hatched out this spring in that shad spawn. Finally, to did that in the last one. To finish up with something that is going to be my bait. You know, last month we mentioned a shaky head as kind of being the follow-up, you know, kind of the cleanup bait. This month, really, you start getting towards November on into December. I see those fish, a lot of this stuff is all shad oriented, right? You know, I mean, topwaters, lipless, crankbaits. You know, you can throw crawdad colors in some of those, but a jig is something that I definitely see those fish start to key in more, I feel like, in the month of November than they were in October. So a jig, you know, pitching that, whether it's just on rocky banks or pitching that on, you know, isolated pieces of wood, skipping it underneath shallow boat docks, any of those type of things, a jig is definitely a great tool once you get in the month of November. Usually going to be a 1/2 ounce pros jig. Bama Crawl's one of my favorite colors. Then just use, you know, a matching Elite Bass Pro Elite chunk on the back of that. Just match up the colors with that. For that Bama Crawl, if the water's a little bit off colored, if the water's pretty clear, that's a really tough color in that jig to beat. So that definitely is one that gets the nod. But 1/2 ounce is my go-to. If it's really, you know, really clear water, I'll take that 3/8. I'll trim it down. I may be using Elite Chunk Junior on the back of it just to make it a little bit smaller profile. But a 1/2 ounce is generally my go-to on that. So hope these 4 baits will help you this month of November. Definitely a transition time of the year, man. Big thing to think about is where these fish are today, they may not be tomorrow, certainly not by next week. So fish are moving a lot. If you stay with them, you're liable to have one of the best days of fishing for the whole year.